which means we need an integrated asset strategy. Why I always recommend not only to create a draft therapeutic product profile and your initial labeling concepts very, very early in development, but also very early and immediately look at your early value proposition. That early value proposition grounded in a very clear understanding of what the unmet need is in that indication, and specifically what part of that unmet need, if not a cure, you can target. Yeah? And even if it is a cure, how do you basically generate evidence that shows what the benefit of creating that cure effectively means to the different stakeholders, not just the regulators? So that early value proposition will look not only at the regulatory perspective, but will look at the stakeholder perspective, the patients centrally, because everything that we do should be patient-centered. Look at the payers and the HTA perspective, but look at the scientific community, our KOLs and our physicians as well. Hence these logos here, these little icons here to denote these different stakeholders. That will lead to our clinical development plan. In parallel, we already have an evidence generation plan. That evidence generation plan is created in parallel and in conjunction with the clinical development plan. You might even see it differently nowadays and say, no, these documents need to be reintegrated together. Yes, obviously, I have no problem with the fact that if you have your TPP, you have a second page with your early value proposition very well. But I don't like the TPPs, where the TPPs is half the page is efficacy, 1/3 of the page is safety, and then at the bottom there are some things like hospitalization and quality of life, and some things are boxed in the bottom there, yeah, as a footnote quasi. Don't do those things. They are equally important. So if you're going to know that you're going to approve on a surrogate intermediate outcome, make sure that at the same time you're generating evidence to show how that intermediate biomarker or whatever it is, surrogate outcome, actually translates into clinical outcomes in the longer term. Yeah. So that payers, at least when you bring the data based on the surrogate outcomes, because that's all you have, because you have a 1-year clinical trial or a 6-month clinical trial, whereas you're selling potentially, you know, a therapy that would have a duration of 50 years, but you're showing that that intermediate endpoint that you're looking at, that biomarker is in fact a disease modifying or a disease, how would I say that correctly? It's a disease progression. Basically, it's a disease progression monitoring or prognosticating biomarker. It's a biomarker based on which you understand whether that disease will actually progress over time. And that's the entire point, obviously, that we can say with cell and gene therapy. It's very obvious that what we are trying to do is we're trying to treat, for example, in pediatric patients, we're trying to treat so early that certain neurodegenerative processes, that certain neurological processes, that they don't even occur. Yeah. So waiting for symptoms to occur and then treating the symptoms, which is, of course, our standard procedure, yeah, is anathema to a proper gene therapy in a pediatric population. And we have to make payers understand that the entire point of the treatment is to treat so early, for example, in SMA, that, yeah, muscle deficiency and breathing difficulties, that they never even appear. So saying, oh, we're going to wait for first symptoms before we approve this therapy, that defeats the entire point of the gene therapy in SMA or many, many other neurological and neurodegenerative diseases. So we need to show that whatever progression biomarker that we have here is a good predictor for disease progression. And we have to show that in terms of the natural history data and other data that we generate. That is part of the evidence generation plan. That's part of that CDX part, that companion diagnostic or that companion biomarker part of your evidence generation plan. So that's what I mean when I say integrated asset strategy.